Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Jeff Smith here in the Eyewitness News Weather Center, and we have breaking news from the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Hunter aircraft are in Hurricane Dorian right now. They've been investigating this system, and they have found that it has rapidly intensified during the past few hours, now up to a Category 4, extremely dangerous hurricane. Winds of 130 miles per hour, and we could tell that this was going to happen. I mean, the satellite picture looks so impressive, very symmetrical storm, very well-defined eye right in the center there. The pressure has fallen unbelievably. It was 970 millibars at 5 p.m. It has fallen 20 millibars in a little more than 3 hours. That is rapid, super rapid intensification. West-northwest right now at 10 miles per hour is its current movement, and it's located about 565 miles east-southeast of the Florida coastline there. So it's moving in the general direction of Florida. One thing we're confident of, it's moving into an area where it can continue to intensify. The thing that's very uncertain as we go forward in time is the path of the storm, especially as it approaches the Florida coastline. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. Wave heights around the storm about 24 feet right now, and a lot of those waves are propagating outward, and eventually some of them will reach the East Coast. They won't be 24 feet high, but there could be some rough surf spreading into Florida and the Carolinas over the next couple of days, even all the way up to our beaches here in the tri-state area, Jersey Shore, the beaches of Long Island, especially by Labor Day. Could be a high risk of rip currents by then. Also, this storm is going to be moving over very warm water, increasingly warm water, as a matter of fact. The Gulf Stream is out here, water that flows from the Gulf of Mexico up through up off of the east coast of Florida and off of the Carolinas. This is some of the warmest water in the Atlantic Basin, in some cases in the upper 80s, and that's what these storms really feed off of, and it's heading toward that direction right now. Also, we have very weak wind shear. We don't have much wind shear to rip the storm apart, and there's a lot of moist air around it right now. Earlier, it was struggling because we had a lot of dry air being entrained into the center. Not the case anymore. So all the factors coming together to allow for intensification and, at the very least, maintenance of that strength of Category 4. And that's what the National Hurricane Center is predicting, getting up to 140 miles per hour as it continues chugging off to the west and the northwest. And this would put it near the northern end of Grand Bahama Island, where we do, by the way, have a hurricane warning. People on Grand Bahama are being urged to rush their preparations to completion with the arrival of Dorian. There could be a 15-foot storm surge in parts of the northern Bahamas. And especially with that Category 4 intensity, there could be some very destructive winds as well, causing a lot of damage and destruction there. So that's by Sunday at 2 p.m. The storm will start to slow down a little bit as the steering winds in the atmosphere start to slow down. Initially, we have a ridge of high pressure kind of steering the storm off to the west, but as that ridge weakens and kind of retreats off to the north and east, the storm doesn't have much of a steering wheel in the atmosphere, so it kind of slows down and meanders a little bit. And by Monday at 2 p.m., so Labor Day at 2 p.m., it's still in the northwestern Bahamas. You're probably already getting some tropical storm force winds onto the east coast of Florida by that point. A lot of times when these storms slow down, they're about to make a turn. And I think this will be no exception. I think what will happen is it'll slow down a little bit, and then it will start turning off to the north. When that turn occurs is going to have huge ramifications on where this makes landfall, when this makes landfall, and even if it makes landfall, because if it makes a really early turn to the north after the Bahamas, it could actually avoid the Florida coastline. That would obviously be a best case scenario. But based on our cone of uncertainty, you have to go by this. This is the potential track area, and it includes much of the state of Florida by Tuesday at 2 p.m. And you'll notice compared to yesterday, everything's a little bit slower. So we're thinking Tuesday for a landfall versus what we were thinking yesterday was more like Monday for a landfall. Now we're thinking maybe it waits until Tuesday afternoon to make that potential landfall. So right in the center of this cone is the official National Hurricane Center forecast, but this entire shaded region is the potential track area of the storm. And I want to show you that the certainty of where it's going to actually make landfall, or if it's going to make landfall, has not really increased during the past 24 hours. The confidence has not increased in terms of where this is going to go after it gets off of the east coast of Florida. One thing we're very sure of, though, it's going to make that northward turn. The question is, when does that happen? So by Wednesday at 2 p.m., according to the official forecast, you have a Category 2 storm up near Jacksonville. So if it actually took that path from the National Hurricane Center, it would involve a tremendous number of people along the Florida coastline. You'd get a landfall, say down near Fort Pierce, and then it would travel northward along the Space Coast and then up into the northeastern part of the state. That would not be a good scenario. That would mean a lot of people are affected by a Category 4, weakening to a 3, weakening to a 2, and also quite a bit of rainfall because of the slow movement of the storm. So a lot of questions are yet to be answered, and I'd like to see everyone along the Florida coastline preparing for the storm, because according to this cone of uncertainty, this potential track area, anyone from the Keys all the way up to Jacksonville could get hit. And now that cone also includes the southern part of South Carolina all the way up to the coast of Georgia as well. So in an extreme example, it moves along the southern part of the cone, hits near Miami, potentially moves into the Gulf. The most likely scenario somewhere in the middle here. And then there's another extreme scenario where it takes that turn, and this would be the best case scenario, well east of the Florida coastline, and Florida would not get involved in the core of the hurricane with the strongest winds and the heaviest rainfall. But right now, that's not the most likely scenario. So as we head through next week, the Sunday all the way through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday time frame, it all depends on what happens with this turn. The earlier turn is better case scenario for Florida, maybe a worst case scenario though for the Carolinas, because this storm could really maintain itself over the water and then eventually make landfall South Carolina or even parts of North Carolina. The later turn, you make a landfall in Florida, and then it starts turning to the north, potentially over the eastern parts of the Gulf of Mexico. Eventually, by later on next week, we're going to be looking at those steering winds very carefully. And right now, it looks like they would protect us from getting a lot of the moisture from Dorian. We could get some fringe effects from it by late in the week. If that steering wind changed from more of a westerly direction to more of a southerly direction, it would be able to transport a lot of Dorian's remnants up the coast. So we'll just have to watch that and see how that evolves during the next several days and into next week to see any effects around here in the tri-state area. Right now, it looks like we'll definitely get indirect effects from the storm in terms of the high risk of rip currents developing by Labor Day. So here are the key points here. It's a potential landfall. It's looking later than it did before. Perhaps this happens during the day on Tuesday instead of Monday, somewhere along, again, we don't know where, somewhere along the east coast of Florida. The storm is slowing down as it approaches the coast, and then it makes that turn off to the north. That will do a few things here. It's going to prolong the wind, the rain, and also the storm surge flooding. And another thing to keep in mind, we have very high tides, something called king tides. These are some of the highest tides of the year, and they last right through Monday and into Tuesday. So that could really exacerbate the storm surge flooding depending on where this thing eventually makes landfall. So there are your key points there. And we're going to have a full update coming up on Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock tonight. We'll be getting that all-important 11 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, which won't only include the current intensity of the storm, it'll also include a new forecast cone. So you'll definitely want to tune into Channel 7 Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock. And in the meantime, you can download our news app on the App Store and also on Google Play. And feel free, don't hesitate to contact me on social media at Jeff Smith ABC7 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a great night.